The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
Modernizing our roads, our airports, our ports, our waterways.
Tonight on Politics Now, State of the Union, the new agenda for President Joe Biden after his address to Congress and the nation.
We need a voucher program.
That's Republican gubernatorial candidate Joey Gilbert. He tells us his plans for education and reworking sentencing reform.
I would imagine that's something that's going to be discussed at the next session.
Will CCSD get broken up? The chair of the Education Committee tells us what he expects in the legislature.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now.
Thank you for joining us here on Politics Now. I'm John Langler. We start, though, with an investigation by Nevada State Police. Detectives are now looking into verbal harassment against Governor Steve Sisolak. The man responsible recorded it all, although we're not able to show it to you here. First, on this video, the suspect told the governor he should be strung up by a lamppost. Then he made comments about First Lady Kathy Sisolak's Asian heritage. The man refused to apologize. Now, Governor Sisolak's campaign called the abuse on camera racist, says the attacks are unbecoming behavior for Nevadans. While the more extreme right in Nevada, Republicans anyway, stood behind the suspect, the main Nevada GOP condemned the verbal attack. Gubernatorial candidate and Sheriff Joe Lombardo, well, he called the harmful rhetoric a distraction. He says the only recourse is voting the governor out. We'll continue to watch this investigation. On Tuesday, President Joe Biden held his first State of the Union speech. Now he and Democrats on Capitol Hill, they're pushing the agenda for the year. As Basil John looks into how Democrats are hoping to make progress.
Fresh off outlining his agenda during the State of the Union, President Joe Biden started making his case to the American people.
Invest in America. Educate the American people. Grow the workforce.
At an event in Wisconsin, the president emphasized how his bipartisan infrastructure law is creating jobs.
Modernizing our roads, our airports, our ports, our waterways.
And in North Carolina, Vice President Kamala Harris said the administration is fighting for a better future.
Our fight starts with lowering the cost of living for working families.
Another item in the president's speech was a call to expand background checks and ban assault-style weapons.
My hope is that the president's dedication to this cause will give us more momentum.
Connecticut Senators Richard Blumenthal and Chris Murphy, as well as Connecticut Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, are ready to take steps to reduce gun deaths.
Step up and pass meaningful legislation that will reduce the rate of gun violence.
It's about the health and safety of our children.
While President Biden called for more funding for police to reduce gun violence, Senator Murphy says there are other ways to address the problem.
This administration can do more.
But Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell says all the president's plans are out of touch with the country and will lead to trouble for Democrats at this year's November elections.
If President Biden does not correct course sharply and quickly, the American people may correct the course for him.
Reporting in Washington, I'm Basil John.
Joining us now to talk about the State of the Union, Alex Limon from our Washington, D.C. bureau. Alex, in the State of the Union speech, President Biden laid out a lot of different aspects of his agenda. What is the first part of what he described earlier this week that he's going to try and push through Capitol Hill?
Well, President Biden talked a lot about what he called his unity agenda, things that he believes that he can get to pass through Congress with bipartisan support, getting Democrats, Republicans, and some of those centrist moderates on board. And he pointed toward his bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed by Congress as kind of a sign that he can get this done. And so he talked about several things within that so-called unity agenda, things like fighting the opioid epidemic, tackling the issue of children's mental health, which a lot of children's health care experts and the American Pediatrics Association said has reached crisis levels because of both the pandemic and the issue that social media really fuels that problem, especially when really young kids and teens are, allowed to use it to a certain extent. It's just really not helpful. So those were things the president talked about.
A number one issue for a lot of us these days, of course, is inflation. It touches so many parts of our economy. What's the plan from the White House, from the president, to try and deal with this?
Yeah, President Biden really tried to make the point to the American people that he understands what they're feeling, that he sort of grew up in the type of middle-class family that felt that pain whenever prices did rise. And so he tried to make that connection with Americans. He also tried to talk about what the administration is trying to do, for example, releasing tens of millions of barrels of oil from the Strategic National Reserve, and also talked about how he has gotten allies to do the same around the world. But it's tough to know whether that's really going to make much of an impact on gas prices, for example, at all, because of the crisis that we are seeing in Ukraine and Russia, which is obviously having the opposite effect and driving those prices up. The president also talked about, for example, trying to tackle the higher prices of goods by making more things in America.
Nevada Democrats serving in Congress applauded the president's speech. Well, for months here on Politics Now, we've been speaking with Nevada's gubernatorial candidates. Among the Republican challengers, Sheriff Joe Lombardo has the fundraising lead. However, he has not taken part in any of the debates. On the other hand, former boxer, current attorney, and President Trump supporter Joey Gilbert, he's been front and center. I sat down with him this week, and we started with a topic where he separates himself from the other Republican candidates: sentencing reform. Speaking of criminal justice reform, sentencing guidelines have been altered in the last legislative session. Let's talk about marijuana penalties, marijuana felony crimes. Would you like to see lighter or stiffer sentences specific to marijuana drug crimes?
Well, you know, I've taken some heat in the previous couple months because at one time I was supporting Attorney General Aaron Ford when he was our majority leader in the Senate, because we both agreed that we needed to see some changes on marijuana laws. How can you have a recreational state or adult use state and then try and lock somebody up for an amount of marijuana that you can fly across the country with? So we need to make sure that people that have felonies or were convicted of those kinds of cases years ago get that stain off their record so they can have a chance to compete, you know, for jobs and have, you know, good opportunities.
Has your opinion of or your thoughts on dealing with the issue of immigration changed since you announced your candidacy?
I mean, look, at the end of the day, we want lawful, legal immigration. I think that's, I don't think anybody's against that. I am absolutely 100% against illegal immigration where they're busing thousands of people in from the border states and dumping them here in Clark County and up in northern Nevada. That can't happen. We don't have the time or the resources or the, you know, the ability, the sustainability for folks like that. So I'm against that. Right now, I think we need a complete pause, almost a moratorium on immigration till we get the Remain in Mexico back in place and get that wall finished.
The environment. Here in southern Nevada, we have the issue with the water dropping on the Colorado and Lake Mead. Up north, there's issues with the environment and all the wildfires that there have been up there in recent years. Let's talk specifically about the Colorado River. How would you, as governor, try to solve the issue of the ongoing drought down here in southern Nevada?
Well, there's a lot of things to do about the drought in southern Nevada. Number one, we let California take 7 times their allotment every year, and no one does a thing about it. Another thing would be, you know, we're looking at opportunities where we have water that we're bringing in, but we can do better things in northern Nevada with irrigating more efficiently to save water. 70% of our water is spent in agriculture. Only 18% is spent in private use. About 7% is spent in the mines. You know, Governor Sisolak's idea is to cut off all lawns and whatnot in southern Nevada, and that'll save less than 1%. We got to think outside the box, and I mean, there's things we can do bringing in water. I'd like to see desalination plants on the coast and pumping water back in here, but that's a whole different topic. But at the end of the day, there are things like we could do in the central part of Nevada with cloud seeding. They're doing it with Desert Research Institute, so we can bring on more water. But we've got to open all options, and we need to sit down with the leaders in the north and people down here in the south and come to an agreement.
How do you plan to tackle the issue of education if you're elected governor?
Well, look, unless the public schools are forced to compete with students, they're never going to get better. So we need a voucher program. We need a voucher program. We need charter schools. You know, school choice is the teachers union bait and switch. You know, you're still stuck in the same broken system. We need a complete overhaul. The critical race theory, the transgender indoctrination agenda stuff. And again, that's scratching the surface. You know, you look in whatever you want to look at credit recovery. You want to look at restorative discipline. These are things that are not helping these kids. And again, I'm not just saying this. We are 49th and 50th in the nation for 10 years straight.
We've asked every candidate for governor this question here in Clark County. What are your thoughts on the idea of splitting up Clark County School
Absolutely.
District?
It's too big.
How come? It's too big? Just simply because it's too big?
It's too big and local control. There's no reason that in Mesquite and all these other places where I've gone where they say they're under CCSD, that doesn't make sense to me. It needs to be split up. Local control is the answer.
You were at the rally.
Actually, I was at a medical tyranny rally. I was not at the Stop the Steal rally, but I was in D.C. I was in our nation's capital on January 6th. Very proud to have been there, standing up for all rights, for all our constitutional rights and civil liberties that were trampled on by all these blue state governors and some red state governors. And so I was there speaking against mask mandates, lockdowns, what I knew were the forthcoming vaccine mandates, which did come, and had been nothing but a complete disaster, have ruined this state. And again, the only thing lockdowns slow is the economy.
We spoke about a lot of topics with Mr. Gilbert. He also told us that he has plans to reimagine the Las Vegas Strip, but he wanted to save further details for the general election. You can watch the full interview at 8newsnow.com. The number of active registered voters in Nevada is increasing. More people are registered now as nonpartisan. Secretary of State's office says there were 11,700 new voters in February. 9,200 of them registered as nonpartisan, as you see there. Now, nonpartisan is the default answer at the DMV, but a lot of people are switching their party affiliations. More than 1,400 voters are now registered as Republican, 856 as Democrats of the new registered voters. Next on Politics Now, we're going to talk about breaking up Clark County School District.
There's a lot of work that has to go into that.
State Senator Mo Dennis chairs the Education Committee. We ask him about the potential of carving up one of the nation's biggest school districts. Plus, how the discussion about esports betting centers around threats to the sport's integrity.
$5.99, only at Jack in the Box.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
Calls to break up Clark County School District are growing. A few weeks ago on this program, Governor Steve Sisolak told us he was in favor of at least the idea. All Republican gubernatorial candidates that we have asked are also in favor of breaking it up. Several members of the Henderson City Council are actively trying to split Clark County School District. Now, this has been discussed for years. Back in 2015, there was a push in the legislature to split up CCSD. A bill to make it into 3 parts passed and was signed by then Governor Brian Sandoval, something that would have had to happen within 3 years. But 2 years later, a separate bill passed. That measure kept CCSD intact, but allowed for more local control within the district. So will the new call for reforms see more success? I spoke with State Senator Mo Dennis. He, Democrat, is the chair of the legislature's Joint Education Committee. He says he expects this to come up in the next session. Something that we've been asking all the candidates for governor about is something that you're familiar with, this idea of breaking up Clark County School District. As long as I was in Clark County School District, that's been something that always gets brought up, and then when it gets to the legislative chambers, it just kind of dissolves into something else. Gubernatorial candidates say they're open to at least the idea of it. All of them seem to say that. What do you think about that idea?
Well, I mean, it's obvious. I think that the question should be, what is it that we need to do to make education better for our kids? If the current way that we're doing it is not working, then we need to look for other ways. One of the things that we're doing in the interim, and I as the chair of the interim committee, I'm putting together a task force, or I guess /summit on school governance. With the school board trustees and how do we administrate. I think all those are all things that we need to be talking about. How do we put the right governance in place to ensure that we have student achievement? And with the new funding plan that focuses on the needs of an individual student.
Maybe I'm reading between the lines here, but it seems like at least there's more willingness now to be open to that idea. In the past, maybe it would be shot down right away. Is that, am I jumping to too many of a conclusion there?
Well, I won't say that it's been shot down right away in the past. I think that, as a legislature, we have 120 days to do something, when we meet in session. And a lot of times the work hasn't been done in order to do that kind of legislation. And so, a lot of the work that goes on in the interim, a lot of the work looking at some of the studies that they've done, I think all of that has to happen, for something like that to occur. There's a lot of work that has to go into that. And so making sure that the folks that are making proposals have been able to get that work done so that the discussion can really be had during that 120 days. It's that's always been the challenge. And a lot of times it's not that people didn't want to do something, it's that they ran out of time.
Do you think Clark County School District is too big?
In some respects, I think they're really big. I think in other respects, I think that, I always look at the funding because people say you can't throw money at education, but in the last few years, we've actually been putting more money into education, and we've seen better results than we've ever seen. A lot of times people complain about stuff that happened in the past, something that was already corrected. And what we need to do is deal with the issues that are before us today. And we know that if we put that funding into programs that work, that we're going to have achievement. And so I think that we're putting together all the different pieces that are going to help with that. And whether, the district is too big or not, I think that, for me, I don't look at it in that respect. There are a lot of benefits, obviously, to being big as far as purchasing power.
Now, supporters of splitting up CCSD suggest it would, among other things, cut down on administrative costs. Senator Dennis disputes that, pointing out the district already has the lowest administrative costs in the country. We'll have more from Senator Dennis on education coming up in later programs. Next on Politics Now, Metro and ICE. Up next, we'll take a closer look at how gubernatorial candidate and Sheriff Joe Lombardo has handled immigration while running Metro Police. And it could be the next frontier, the main concern for members of a new e-sports commission. This is 8 News Now.
News Now. You're watching Politics Now.
Often debated, never really solved. Immigration is frequently a topic here in Nevada. Several Republican candidates for governor have been heavily involved in the immigration debate for years. Former Senator Dean Heller, for example, who's running for governor, he voted for the so-called Gang of Eight immigration bill. When we spoke with him a few weeks ago, though, his focus was on just Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo's policies.
The federal government, when they had 250,000 people coming over the border, said, "Hey, we got to ship these people somewhere," and they brought them to sanctuary cities. So Clark County, Las Vegas, was getting all these illegal immigrants bussed in. And by the way, they don't stay in Clark County. When I'm in Elko, they ask me, "Hey, why should we care if Clark County is a sanctuary city or not?" I said, "Because they don't stay in Clark County. They take their gangs and they take their drugs and they move them to Washoe and they move them to Humboldt and they move them to Elko, and the rest of the state becomes full of gangs and drug problems." And this is all on this sheriff. He turned this county into a sanctuary city, and I will reverse all of those policies, including his favorite policy of catch and release.
Sheriff Lombardo quit using the ICE database with Metro Police. That's called 287G. He did that after a federal court ruling struck down the program. Heller has attacked Lombardo on that. Democrats accuse Lombardo of turning over everyone to immigration officials. So we asked the sheriff to clarify the policy.
Now we just present the information to ICE. They make the evaluation through their own resources, and that information that we provide to ICE is people that have been arrested for violent crime, to include domestic violence and DUI. We did that in the past. We're continuing to do it. We haven't gone into the property type crime or the minor type crime space. My intent is to present people that intend to commit harm.
Separately, the Las Vegas Review-Journal reported Metro Police are still cooperating with ICE officials, and Sheriff Lombardo acknowledged that in our interview as well. Republican Senate candidate Adam Laxalt, meanwhile, is opening a new campaign office. His Latinos for Laxalt office is over at Charleston and Jones. Features several Latino women who are running for office right now: Las Vegas City Councilwoman Victoria Seaman and Congressional District 1 candidate Carolina Serrano. Several former Trump campaign advisors were also on hand, former President Trump campaign advisors. Well, there's still a lot to figure out for people before they can start betting on esports. This week, a Gaming Control Board Committee on Esports held its first meeting. The members are trying to create gambling rules for Nevada. The main concern is integrity, as it is with all gaming. One of those testifying, Ian Smith from the nonprofit Esports Integrity Commission. Smith says 92% of match fixing in esports is because of betting fraud.
Where there is a market, there are always people trying to manipulate it. So the only question is whether they're succeeding.
Smith, the man at the top of your screen there, he lobbied for stronger regulations to improve the wagering landscape. The new committee is going to be meeting every quarter. $500 million. It's a lot of money, and it's how much Governor Sisolak plans to put towards affordable housing in Nevada. He announced that investment in his State of the State address. But it is important to know what actually counts as affordable housing. Homes for people who make less than 60% of the average person. $300 million is going to be put into 1,000 new affordable housing units across the state. $130 million will go towards rehabbing about 3,000 units already affordable. The rest will go to buying land and putting more houses on an incentive program to drop the cost of new houses. A lot of work. Next, time for the hot seat. Coming up on Politics Now, the influential senators that Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson is meeting with, and when her confirmation hearings will start.
cash in addition to all public offers.
You're watching Politics Now.
Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson is meeting with lawmakers in Washington, D.C. ahead of her confirmation hearings. Here you can see that she's meeting there with Republican senators. That's Chuck Grassley, Ben Sasse also she met with. And also she met with Senate Judiciary Chair Dick Durbin as well. Her confirmation hearings are scheduled for March 21st to the 24th. Typically, the most contentious part is during the questioning. That'll be on days 2 and day 3. This week in What to Watch, candidates filing for office. The filing period for non-judicial races starts in Nevada on Monday, and it runs until March 18th. Candidates basically have 10 days to officially declare for an office. So we're going to watch to see if there's any last-minute additions and see if all the candidates are going to stick in the Republican gubernatorial primary or possibly switch to some other seats. Could be a very interesting week. Thank you for watching Politics Now. We'll be back with you next week. Take care.